I asked Alex this yesterday, and he kind of mentioned it. How difficult has it been to get a kind of an accurate assessment of where Deshaun is because of some of the mitigating circumstances that the West in Houston and the weather the last couple of weeks? How much has that kind of challenged you guys in kind of digging a little deeper into his performances as you review him?
Yeah, I think that's always a part of it. I think it's important to keep in mind for us as we evaluate each game and go through the week in terms of where he's at and where we're trying to get to. The weather, the matchup, the injury, all of that plays a factor. So I think that certainly goes into our process. But I think a big part of what we're trying to evaluate is, you see it during the week too. So it's decision making, it's mechanics, it's understanding the offense. And I think we've seen a lot of that growth here over the last 4 weeks. So very encouraged by that. And I think we're going to continue to see that as we finish the season here.
That when you looked at how he performed and kind of the wind and some of the throws he made, how did you think he handled all that?
I thought he handled it really well. I think that was one of the big takeaways for me and for him coming out of the game is that he can handle that weather and he can play at a high level in that weather. And he made some really impressive plays and some really impressive throws throughout the game and certainly late in the game that put us in a position to potentially score there at the end that are difficult at best in those decisions, or in those conditions rather. So very encouraged by that.
Yesterday about the footwork changes that he's had to make from when he was in Houston to here.
Yeah.
Can you just explain some of the differences that he's having to go through?
Yeah, and again, a lot of it is just tying it to the concepts as much as anything. But certainly there's always an adjustment when you come into a new system in terms of what we're going to ask him from a footwork standpoint of saying, hey, we're going to put this foot forward. We want you to hit in this rhythm. We want to take these hitches. We want to make sure you're moving on your progression when you're at this place in the footwork. And I think there's always going to be some things that we're going to teach differently in that regard. And I think he's really embraced that, but it certainly is a process for him to it's one thing to think about it and say it and do it in practice. It's another when you're in the course of a game and you just, came off a different play and it's going quick and you got 10 seconds to think about it. So I think that's something he's definitely working on, and it's been a transition that I think he's embraced, and it's been good to see.
It's like a pretty significant difference that he's had to go through?
I think he'd probably be better at answering that than me, because obviously I haven't done it two different ways, especially at this level with the all the things that he's trying to consider as he goes through it. But I think it's an adjustment. I wouldn't say significant, but I think it's definitely a part of the process, and it's not. It shouldn't be overlooked.
You mentioned he felt his biggest progress has come just operationally. I think was the exact word he used. He's been pleased with how there hasn't been a lot of operational errors and that sort of thing. Can you expand a little bit more on that and what?
Yeah.
What specifically you're seeing how that progress has gone?
Yeah, I think a big part of the operational side of it is just in and out of the huddle and everything that happens before the ball is snapped, of just how efficient we can be. The quicker that we can get to the line of scrimmage, the better he is at calling the play, or that we are at getting in the play and getting out of the huddle, the more time he has at the line of scrimmage to evaluate his decision process. And maybe we need to check into a player. Maybe it's going to change his read or where he needs to go with the football. And I think we've seen over these last couple weeks that it's getting better and better. We're getting in and out of the huddle quicker. We're making quicker, more confident decisions at the line of scrimmage prior to the ball being snapped. I think that's a really important part of it.
Kind of off of that, you go back to the Baltimore game, you guys went on that long drive. There was a lot of no huddle. Is the comfortability you're seeing with him operationally allow you to do more of that no huddle stuff because you feel he knows what he's got kind of a grasp on those things?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it. I think, and not only just the no huddle, it's being able to jump in and out of no huddle. It's being able to not always be at the same tempo or always call the same system of plays, and to allow him to operate the entire offense, which I think he's really embraced and has improved on these last couple of weeks.
So when you guys are running that no huddle, how much of that is Kevin in the headset, and how much of that is Deshaun kind of diagnosing as he goes up to the line?
It's going to be a little of both. I think it's all, obviously we're giving him a play or a formation, and there's some criteria that we've built in during the week to make sure he's comfortable with what's going on. And then certainly we can, give him some information as we get there, as he gets up to the line of scrimmage, making sure everybody's in the right formation. And then ultimately it's on him to make sure he's looking at the right things and identifying the coverage and getting us into the right play. So I think early in that process it's us, and then the later in the down or closer to the snap, ultimately it goes on him, because he's going to be the one with the ball in his hand or ultimately making the decision.
you obviously knew the type of player you were getting before he got on the field, but are there things you've kind of discovered or learned just kind of seeing him out there and kind of seeing what he can do? Has anything like surprised you about him?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of it was one of the questions you just asked is some of that cold weather stuff and the wind, and that's one of the more unique games I've ever played in. So from a guy who has played a lot of his career at Clemson and Houston, I was very curious to see what that was like and very impressed at how he handled it. So I think that's certainly one of those things. I think his demeanor in just terms of how even keel he is over the course of the game is something, you watch it from a distance and you're not sure what it's like, and then you see him in game, regardless of the flow of the game, he's always locked in. He's always very even keel with his teammates. So those are two things I think that I've taken away, big positives over the last couple of weeks.
It's just like it's hard to quantify, but we talked about him trying to close that gap from where he was in 2020 to now. Like, do you get a sense for how close he is? Because I know he's made progress, but then there's been those extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's hard to evaluate because of that, and I think the big thing, and I know I've said this to him, is like our goal and my goal, and I hope his goal is not to close the gap. It should be to exceed the gap. So I think that's a big part of this, of just never being satisfied with where you're at and always looking for, hey, can we improve this? Could you have done better here? Whether the outcome was perfect in his mind or not, there's always going to be something that we can get better at. And I think he's embraced that, and I definitely think we've seen that. Certainly it can be tricky at times to evaluate on game day, but I think we've even seen that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, just in terms of the performances at practice as well.
You guys talk about the right amount of runs for him in a game. Whether it's scrambling or just design runs, because that's such a part of his skill set. But I'm sure you don't want to overdo it.
No, and I think the big thing for him, and he knows this, is like if he's willing to protect himself and make the right decisions with the ball and with the ball in his hand, you can run him all you want. It's really about him doing the right thing and making the right decisions and then protecting himself when he is running with the football. I don't think you'd ever put a number on it. I think ultimately the number is going to be whatever it takes to win the game. I mean, that's the easy answer. And certainly that's a part of our process. A lot of it may be dictated by defensive look of, hey, you're giving him the option, and if the look tells him to take it a bunch, he's going to take it. And if the look doesn't, he's going to hand it off or make a different decision, whether we're getting into a different play. So I think that's a balance in terms of the way we build the offense, less so than like the game-to-game number.
Been kind of transitioning into that backup role, and how important has he been to Deshaun's success?
He's been awesome. I mean, I think it's a role he's been in before. I think he knew, as he said, what he signed up for, and it's something he's embraced. I think he's definitely been there to help and to coach and to mentor, and he's really done a great job in that role, and I think it's really helped Deshaun over these last couple of weeks.
Excited to see Josh get that start last night.
Yeah, really happy for him. He's a great kid. He worked really hard when he was here, so excited for him to get that opportunity, and thought he did a pretty good job in the very little I watched before I went to bed.
This may be anecdotal more than anything, but the week of the Houston game and even after the Houston game, just in interactions with us, in press conferences and everything, I don't want to say timid, but he was kind of quiet, reserved. It seems like as the week's gone on, a lot more demonstrative, a lot more, kind of in command. Have you noticed that also in meetings and on the practice field, just becoming more in command like you expect a starting quarterback?
Yeah, I think it's certainly you've seen that development. And I think it's you're doing something for the first time, whether it's on the field with new teammates, a new system, all of that plays into it. So I think the more experience you get at doing anything, the more confident you're going to be in your ability to do it. And I think we're seeing that over these last couple of weeks with him.
I guess when he first got back out there, was overstriding like a problem that you guys were seeing out there with him?
Yeah, and a lot of it can be at the top of his drop. Anytime you get long as a quarterback and you're not in rhythm, it can throw off the passing game. So I think that was something we definitely kind of kept an eye on early and felt like, again, it's one thing to do it in practice, and then it's a whole other thing to do it at full speed in a game. And so even if it looked great in practice all week, once it got full speed, you had to point it out again and say, hey, you're getting long here, you're overstriding here, you're a little off balance here. So those were certainly something we've looked at throughout these last couple of weeks as we've gone through these games.